Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leaders Room brought to you by the Iclif Leadership and Governance Center. My name is Rajiv Peshavria and the Leaders Room is where we talk to global leaders about what it takes to create sustainable success. Today we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Pradeep Pant, Executive Vice President and President of Asia Pacific and EMEA for Mondelez International, formerly known as Kraft Foods. Pradeep's track record speaks for itself. Prior to his expansive role at Mondelez, Pradeep was Managing Director of Fonterra Brands for Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and served as a member of the Fonterra leadership team. Prior to that, Pradeep spent 19 years with Gillette, where his last position was President for Asia Pacific. Pradeep, welcome to the Leaders Room. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Rajiv. It's a real pleasure.
So let's get straight into it. From where you started, you've come a long way. How would you summarize the secret of your success?
You know, for me, the career has been a place where I learn, contribute, and have fun. Mm-hmm. And that's what my entire career has been for me. So it's been a series of winning and celebrations. So you win and you celebrate. Yeah, a small win, you have a small celebration. A big win, you have a big celebration.
Right. So that's the fun and the celebration and the learning. Talk a little bit more about the learning part.
So learning is when you go into any job, in fact, when you go into any situation in life, I believe you should go in with an open mind, willing to receive input from anyone. You know, I often joke that God has given you 2 ears and only one mouth. There is a balance out there.
Use it in that
Listen
proportion.
more, speak less.
Right.
So you go in with an attitude where you're open to suggestion, open to stimulus from the outside, and you're bound to grow.
And would you say that is what that kind of thinking is what held you in good stead all along?
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So what makes an effective leader, in your opinion?
An effective leader is one who has a vision, who can articulate that vision. So it's not enough just to have a vision, but you should be able to share that vision with people. And then drive your team relentlessly into achieving that mission, that vision that you got. So bring all the people with you, hearts and minds and heads, and carry them through into achieving that vision. That is the real role of the leader. In doing this, I believe one of the most critical leadership imperatives is the removal of fear from an organization. Organizations, people instinctively sometimes are scared of taking action. They're scared to experiment. They're worried about going wrong. When you can remove that fear from the organization and say, people, go out, try things. So what you punish is inaction. What you punish is not wrong action.
Got it.
And that gets an organization galvanized.
You've mentioned a bunch of things, and I want to come back to some of these things, including the fear piece in a bit.
Sure.
But, you know, given your expansive geography, Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, you know, creating a vision and then implementing that vision, as you said, relentlessly is a full-time job.
Yes.
And how does that differ from geography to geography? You move from one day from Asia to Africa to Eastern Europe. How, if at all, do you change your leadership style? Do you manage everybody the same way, differently? This must be challenging.
So I believe that the fundamental drivers, if you look deep down inside, for all people are similar. But there's a huge amount of cultural difference as you move from country to country, people to people. And a good leader must understand, through this process of listening that we talked about, must understand the nuances of the culture in different places. And in all cultures, one thing I've found is that if you're operating with authenticity, going not only from your head, but also from your heart, keeping in mind the nuances of the local culture, you're bound to get through to people, you're bound to build bridges. And those bridges are worth a lot.
And that fundamental authenticity doesn't change.
Must not change.
How you show it might change in the culture.
Absolutely.
I'm really glad to hear this, because our research at the center exactly talks about that.
Fantastic.
We wrote a piece for Harvard which says, leading across borders, don't change a thing. And so, your philosophy is totally in line with ours, and I did not fix this in advance. Okay, coming back to that removal of fear. So how do you remove fear? In Asia particularly, we find country after country, we are now studying leadership, by the way, in 18 countries, and the survey results are just coming out. The one thing that's coming out loud and clear is this culture of fear and this culture of top-down hierarchy. I am senior, you listen to me. So while it's refreshing to hear what you just said, how do you do that, particularly in Asia, where there is a natural bias towards that hierarchical fear, if you will?
I try to instill in the organizations that I work with this idea of a circle of experimentation. And the message is, don't try to change the world in one go. Do small experiments. So take a small thing like you want to arrange your displays in modern trade differently from the way it's been done in the past. Take one store, one display, measure the impact. If it's successful, multiply shamelessly. If it is not successful, throw it away and experiment again. And when you experiment and multiply, the cost of the experimentation cannot, by definition, be huge. And when people start seeing that small experimentation is welcome and is not punished, then the fear starts going away. This is not an overnight process, I got to admit.
Yes.
You got to walk the talk. You just can't speak the words and get away with it. But once the circle of experimentation is ingrained in the DNA of the organization, you'll start seeing change.
And I guess this might also involve people at your level also admitting a mistake once in a while.
Absolutely.
It's totally okay to do that. And that's what the signal.
A senior leader who does not dare to show his or her vulnerability is not strong.
In my view, couldn't agree with you more. It's not a leader.
It's not a leader.
It's not a leader. Very good, excellent. There are obviously never-ending demands on the time and energy of a leader like you, moving all around the world, implementing that vision, thousands of employees. Where do you derive your you almost need never-ending energy? It's a 24/7 job. You're constantly worrying about it, even when you're not working. Where do you get that energy from to keep going? And I mean emotional energy, that intrinsic. Where does it come from?
So, I think you hit the right button. Most people get caught up looking at the metric of time, which is not really a relevant measure in my book. The relevant measure is energy.
Right.
Because time is defined, 24 hours in a day, of which you'll be sleeping 5 or 6, doing the rest of your stuff. So that is limited. Energy is boundless. So once you have a huge store of emotional energy, you can do almost anything. The difficult thing is, this does not happen by just sitting around and wishing. It needs a lot of work. And I'll share with you 2 or 3 things that I do to make sure that my energy keeps multiplying and growing. The first one starts with physical fitness. You have to be physically fit if you want to have a store of energy, which requires a certain discipline of working out regularly, good nutrition, good quality sleep, and so on. Without that, you're not even getting out of the starter's blocks.
Right.
The second thing people don't do, and I think which creates a lot of good energy, is a session of self-reflection and introspection almost daily with yourself, where you confront your fears, you ask questions about your true values, and become more and more self-aware. I believe that creates a huge store of energy inside you. And then you set about what I call a virtuous cycle of energy. You impart energy to people, and by definition, you get a bounce back of energy from them. Now, in the universe, there are these people who are called energy vampires. All of us know them.
Yes.
A cousin somewhere, a friend somewhere.
And there are people in every office like that.
People in every office.
That's right.
So stay away from the energy vampires.
Right.
That's my advice.
Yeah.
And go to the sunny people, throw out energy at them, and bounce it back to yourself. And you'll find that you have the energy to keep going. So even with my kids, I've found, and I've always traveled, I may not statistically have spent a huge amount of time with them, but I'm very, very close to my kids, and that's because I've spent a huge amount of energy with them.
I've heard you say, when you talk about energy, I've heard you talk about vision, and I've heard you talk about values. I did not hear you say the energy comes from hoping for the next promotion or a bigger financial reward. Did I hear that correctly? The main energy comes from that clarity of vision and the clarity of values?
Absolutely.
And the self-reflection?
Absolutely.
Very good.
Most people in the world are not working just for that next dollar.
Right.
I think they want a bigger satisfaction. And when they have that satisfaction of learning, contributing, having fun, wanting to go to work, I think you got something going.
So my last question, how would you describe your purpose in life?
If I look back on my career and I look forward at the next innings, really what's been my biggest energizer for me, my purpose if you like, is to get the most out of my people. If a person has a potential of 100, and if I can get him to perform at 100, I think I've achieved what I wanted to.
Correct.
And energizing people into giving their best, and indeed rising beyond their best, is what drives me on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Actually, I do have one more question before I go, and that is, what advice do you have for aspiring young leaders of tomorrow, those who want to be leaders and be effective in their own leadership?
I'd say as you go to work, don't hesitate to challenge the paradigm. Why you're paid is to challenge the paradigm, to bring about change, to ask the questions, why not? And don't be afraid to speak up your mind. Don't be afraid to experiment. Dare to do things. Make a change. That's what I tell them to do.
And that sounds like what should be the purpose of leadership.
Absolutely.
In any case. Pradeep, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. Once again, thanks very much for visiting the Leaders Room.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.